Our conversation today is with Robert St. John. He's what we like to call a serial entrepreneur. Started in the restaurant business decades ago. I'll let him say how long. Still in the restaurant business, but has branched out into so many other things, including advocacy. So we'll start with the restaurants. Robert, first of all, thank you for sharing your story with us. But when did you know you were going to be in the restaurant business?
Well, thanks for having me, Jeffrey. I'm glad to be here. It's one of these things. It's really like most of my career has been just kind of a situation I've really kind of fallen into, and it's just almost happened to me. So my dad died when I was 6. My mom was a school teacher. She was an art teacher. She raised my brother and me up on an art teacher's salary. And I just say that to say I didn't really have any preconceived. I had no artistic bent, so I wasn't going to be an art teacher. And I wasn't one of these guys that was like, my dad did this, so I'm going to do that kind of thing. So it was really wide open. And I started working when I was 12, just like mowing yards. I was a school janitor one summer, and when I was 15, I got a job at a radio station as a disc jockey, and I worked full time all the way through high school. Mostly doing the 7 to midnight shift, 40 hours a week. Loved it, had a blast. But when it came time to go to college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, what I wanted to major in. Nothing really spoke to me. And I went to Mississippi State at 17 years old as a freshman and just majored in communications because, that's what I knew to that point working in the restaurant business. I mainly just kind of had a good time. I was there for a couple of years, and Mississippi State decided they no longer needed my services in Starkville, and I flunked out of college, which seemed like, other than my father dying, really the worst thing that maybe had happened to me at that point. And so I came home kind of with my tail tucked between my legs. I grew up in Hattiesburg, and I came back here, didn't know what I was going to do. I was embarrassed. Most of my friends were about to head in their junior year of school and were doing well. And I was wandering aimlessly and pretty irresponsibly as well. And there were 2 ladies that were opening up a delicatessen. They had no idea about the restaurant business, which is evident because they hired me as the manager. And it was one of those situations where, almost probably from the first shift of the first day, I fell in love with it. And so I started working in restaurants, and I couldn't get enough. And I managed the delicatessen during the day, and a restaurant opened at night, a Cock of the Walk out of Natchez. And I was on the opening crew as a server there. So I was working day and night in restaurants and just loved it, fell in love with it, and knew pretty instantly that I wanted to open up a restaurant one day. So my path was set. I just needed to kind of straighten my life out and get things settled in my personal life to get serious about it. I went back to school at Southern Miss, got a degree in what they now call hospitality management, and opened the first restaurant in 1987. I was 26 years old. Um, my goals, if you would have asked a 26-year-old Robert, what you want, I think, I just wanted to open one restaurant. I wanted to be able to kind of wear shorts and t-shirts to work every day, and that was it. I probably hadn't thought any further than that. I probably wanted to make money. I was living in a 1-room garage apartment at that time, and I sold a piece of land my grandfather left me for $25,000, and that was my stake in opening that first restaurant.
Was that the Purple Parrot? Was that
That was
your
the
first
Purple
one?
Parrot,
Okay.
Purple Parrot Cafe. We opened on Hardy Street, just really right behind where my office is right now, on December 27th, 1987. And we went for a soft opening, which in the restaurant business, you just open the doors, no marketing, no advertising, nothing. And we hoped people would trickle in, and eventually we kind of get on our feet. I had brought in a chef from Destin, Florida, who was a legend down there. He was a legend for 2 reasons. One, he was a great chef and everybody loved his food. And number 2, he was a party animal. And this guy, he he had a reputation. He may start drinking on Wednesday, and they find him in Panama City on Saturday. We were bringing him up, and I had stopped drinking and partying about 4 years earlier. And I told this guy, I said, "Whatever you do, you can't drink." It wasn't a lot, but really by today's terms, it was everything to me. I mean, I was risking absolutely everything I had. I said, "Whatever you do, you can't drink." And he didn't. And he developed the menu and didn't train the back of the house. I hired the front of the house, mostly people I've been waiting tables with at that time. And we went for this soft opening December 27th, '87. And there a soft opening wasn't to be. We were packed. I mean, from the second we opened the doors, and by about 8 o'clock, I started noticing some hitches in the service. And you probably know what happened. This guy ended up. I learned my first business lesson in the restaurant business, and that is lock the beer cooler. Because this guy drank a case of beer out of the walk-in and a bottle of Dr. Tishner's mouthwash from across the street at the gas station.
Well, Robert, can I ask you? I mean, as someone who partied and
Yeah,
I dropped out of school to play in bands and
yeah.
was no stranger to that too. What made you think that that wasn't going to happen?
Well, I guess I had hope, and he sold us on that, and maybe I was a little naive probably with that too. So we fired our chef opening night, which at the time seemed also like one of the worst things that could have ever happened to me. And actually, in retrospect and looking back with time, it's one of the better things that ever happened to me in business, because what it did, it forced me to get back in the kitchen. And so at that on night number two, I mean, I was back there, and the extent of my cooking experience at that time is that I had asked for and received an easy bake oven for Christmas when I was 6 years old. So I basically cooked with a 100-watt light bulb, and that's it. That's a toy oven.
Oh,
For
I'm
kids that
familiar.
probably
Yeah,
don't even know what that
I
is
know
now.
what that. I know what that is. Wow.
And so I just worked 90 hours a week for the next 4 years. My girlfriend, she was my wife now, she was my girlfriend then. We were closed Sundays in those days, and we would drive down to New Orleans, which I'd done all my life. And I started eating around New Orleans and kind of teaching myself. I would come back and try those dishes out. And, had we not fired that chef opening night, I might have never gotten back in the kitchen, and it wouldn't have opened these other doors. But also, I wouldn't have been able to. I mean, you need to be able to perform every task in a business, or at least know every task well, especially in the restaurant business. So, it kind of started there, and then we've grown. At the first of the, I'm talking to you in February of 2021. This time last year in 2020, we had 6 restaurants and 2 bars. Today we're sitting here with 5 restaurants and 1 bar, and we feel pretty good that we made it out of the what I hope is the worst part of this pandemic still intact. It is certainly the worst time in the history of the restaurant business to be in the restaurant business, but we're kind of bobbing and weaving and making changes and surviving at this point.
Well, you see folks that open a restaurant and it's successful, and then it's not that unusual that they either open another one similar to that or even franchise those. But you have really been creative in the restaurants that you've opened. So is that just a culinary curiosity on your part? Is it strategic business decision on your part, or a combination?
I think it's probably a combination of both. That you look at what the market here needs, and I've done other restaurants and bars in Jackson and Meridian and Slidell. We've got a big project going in Jackson right now that'll be open this fall. But for here in Hattiesburg, um, everything has been just what we knew that Hattiesburg needed an Italian restaurant, and so we opened one. Um, we have a Creole themed casual restaurant. It's kind of the flagship now. We've got a breakfast and lunch place. We've just opened up a Tex-Mex restaurant, and so really it's just what the market we thought needed, but also the creative outlet for that is really where I get most of my enjoyment. I like creating concepts and doing all the interiors and the marketing and the menu design and the food development and all of that kind of thing, which to me is the fun part of the restaurant business. There's a lot of other components that go into it, and we've got a lot of managers. We have 300 employees here, right here in just Midtown Hattiesburg, and we'll be adding another maybe 100 or so in Jackson when we open there.
Well, and you've also transitioned into, I don't know how to say it, a media star. I think if I recall, you started on the Turner Network. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've got a TV show now. That Turner thing came from, I started writing a newspaper column about 22 years ago, I guess. I've been doing it. I've never missed a week in 22 years. I write about 1,000 words a week at the height of newspapers, which that industry is kind of wiped out most part now. I think I was in about 30 newspapers a week, and I'm probably in about maybe 20 or so now. But a lot of things sprouted from that. I've written 11 books. The books kind of came from that, and from the books came this TV show, the Turner South thing you're talking about, which was a regional network that they started. They got a hold of one of these columns I wrote in the maybe early 2000, late 1990s, I guess, and wanted to use it. And so they bought it for the imaging and branding of the network. And that kind of started that whole kind of television ball rolling. And we do, there's a series now that's on PBS called Palate to Palate. And we filmed 5 seasons of that.
With Wyatt Waters.
Yeah,
right?
Wyatt Waters, a guy I've done 4 books with, a very talented watercolor artist.
Tell us that story quick, because that was when that book first came out. I think it was striking because of your talent combined with his talent, because the cover of the book really drew you to it.
Yeah, so the whole book thing, I never planned on writing a column, and I certainly never planned on, like I told you earlier, I just wanted one restaurant, but I never thought I'd get into books. But the column I had been writing for about 2 years, and we had a really good customer who started just wearing me out. Robert, you need to do a cookbook. Robert, you need to. And every time I'd see her, I'd say, Frances, I don't have time. I got too much going on. This went on for about a month or so. And I walked out into the dining room of the Purple Pear one day. She was seated at table 3 with a gentleman. She called me over and said, Robert, sit down. This is so-and-so with this publishing company. Tell him about your cookbook. Well, I didn't have, a cookbook planned, or I hadn't even thought of one, but trying to think quickly on my feet, I said, well, if I were to do a cookbook, I'd have recipes I developed here at the restaurant over the years. I would have stories about the South and food in the South and growing up in the South, like I write in my column. And I'd have watercolors by Wyatt Waters. And without missing a beat, this guy said, well, if you get Wyatt Waters, you got a deal. And the problem is I didn't know Wyatt Waters at the time. And so I hopped in my truck the next day, drove up to Clinton, Mississippi, where his gallery is. He had just opened his own gallery, which is very rare for artists to kind of support themselves out of their own gallery. He does very well with it. And I introduced myself, and we just hit it off. I mean, I had an idea. This idea that I just kind of made up at the table that day was for what would be a coffee table cookbook with his artwork and my recipes and stuff. And we probably talked about that for 20 minutes, then talked about the Beatles for the next 2 hours. And that book came out and ended up being this, it just wildly sold, this kind of phenomenon that nobody ever expected or planned on. And that kind of started the whole book thing, which led to the travel thing, which led to the TV thing. So, we've just, maybe I get bored easy. I don't know.
Well, and I've noticed you've got spices on your website as well.
Yeah, there's a food division, and we're really growing that right now. So we've got several seasonings. We're about to add a couple. We got hot chocolate. We got a couple of pancake mixes coming up, and a few other things in the works. So that's kind of, I've just been, I think, when this comes up, I don't think a lot about, how I ended up where I am, but I think I was just kind of open to opportunity. And I would, I'd tell people, just be open to opportunity and don't be afraid to fail. And I think for entrepreneurs, there's some type of gene we have that, I have friends who are so averse to just, you got to borrow money, you got to go in debt, you got to take risk, and you got to do that. And I don't know if I'm just too dumb not to know any better, or if I just like creating and doing, and I get a kick out of. I was passionate about the restaurant business, like I said earlier, as soon as I started doing it. But all of these other things, I've been passionate about too. I was having my son, who's a sophomore at Mississippi State right now, majoring in business. He and I were talking 6, 7 years ago, and he didn't really know what he wanted to do. And he asked me, and he said, "Dad, what do you think I ought to do when I grow up?" We had one of those kind of discussions. I said, son, whatever it is, don't follow the money. Don't do it for the money. Figure out what you're passionate about, what you like doing, and do that. And I told him this, and I had never thought about it. And as the words were coming out of my mouth, I kind of had a realization or a revelation. And I said, here's the deal, son. Every day I've owned that restaurant, and probably at the time it was 22 years or 24 or something like that. I said, every day, I've never once, and this is a true story, I've never once woke up and gotten up in the morning and said, "Oh, got to go to work." I've never done that. And I had never even thought about that until I was telling him that. And so I said, that's what I wish for you. So whatever that is, it's my theory that success follows passion. And so you got to find out what you're passionate about, and you do it. And it's not like work. It's just, I'm blessed to kind of come in and do what I love to do every day. And it doesn't mean there are no problems. There are tons of problems. Business is problems. A successful business is problems well handled. And if you can't handle problems, you don't need to be in business. So there are always going to be problems. It's just, you just got to handle them and learn how to handle those right.
Well, Robert, it seems like you've reached the stage now where you are successful on several fronts. But you also are now giving that back. So talk about some of those efforts, or some are very visible. For instance, you've been on Fox, you've advocated for getting some help, some financial help for restaurants, but you also are doing so many more things. So tell us some of the things that you're into, why you got involved in those things, and why it's important.
Yeah, so the Fox News thing, I mean, that came from a Wall Street Journal op-ed I wrote, and got a bunch of interview type stuff from that. But I'm a part of a group, a founding member of what's called the Independent Restaurant Coalition, which is a group of independent restaurateurs all across the country, and chefs and restaurateurs. And we have been advocating to get Congress to pass relief for restaurants, because we're out there dropping like flies right now. As I said earlier, it's the worst time history of the restaurant business to be in the restaurant business. And we've actually been successful getting this thing. I think it's about to be added to the current stimulus bill, this thing will save the restaurant industry in America, which is in a lot of ways facing a mass extinction event. And Senator Wicker from Mississippi introduced the Senate version of that bill. I worked with his staff on that, and things are rolling along. So we've got our fingers crossed. We get through this reconciliation that this thing will happen. The other stuff you're talking about, I founded a charity, a nonprofit 501c3 called Extra Table. And it's a statewide nonprofit, but it didn't, kind of like my restaurant career, it didn't start out that way. It was very humble, modest, unintentional beginnings. I was sitting here at my desk one day and got a call. I think it was 2009. I got a call from a place called the Edward Street Fellowship Center here in Hattiesburg, which is a mission pantry. They were feeding about 700 families a month, and they had completely and totally run out of food. I mean, the shelves were empty, and they were freaking out. And they called me and said, "Can you help us?" And I said, "Sure, I'm happy to help." And I figured the quickest, best, easiest way to help them would be call my Cisco rep, the food service distributor, put together an order and have them drop ship it to that agency. I did that. They ended up having food to give to their clients. And that's kind of how the idea was born. And I started thinking from that one simple thing that I never expected, I bet if there were an easier way to get these places food, that they wouldn't be running out of food. But to be honest with you, I was skeptical there was even a hunger problem in Mississippi. I could see maybe some Central American, third world country, but certainly not here in America. So I kind of went in on a fact finding mission on my own and went to a lot of soup kitchens and mission pantries to kind of really see. And I learned quickly there's a huge problem in Mississippi. You got about 670,000 out of 3 million of us who are what the government calls food insecure. About 200,000 of those are kids who eat a school breakfast, a school lunch, and then don't eat again until the next day. But 100,000 are seniors who right now are trying to figure out, can they pay the light bill or can they go to the grocery store? And so I went to Cisco and I said, I've got an idea. It's based on the premise of what if every house and every business had an extra table where they could feed those in need. What I need you to do is sell me food at rock bottom wholesale and deliver it. I'll go out and find the agencies and I'll go out and raise the money. And they said, we're in. And I founded Extra Table on kind of two founding principles I planted our flag on. Number one, 100% of the money we raise for food will always go to food. No administrative costs, no travel cost, office, any of that. And we'll raise administrative funds separately. And number two, it's always going to be healthy food, because Mississippi at the time was number one in food insecurity. We're also number one in obesity, and that's another thing I had a problem with. I'm like, well, somebody's eating something somewhere. We can't be. And what I learned quickly is those two always go hand in hand. If you don't have enough money to lead a proper diet, you're basically living out of a convenience store and eating the cheapest, sugar drinks and cheapest food, which is the worst for you. And that's where the obesity comes from. So we started with one agency, Edward Street, I told you about. And today we're in over 50 across the state. We're in maybe 40 something counties, I think now. And the amazing thing about Extra Table is that it is so efficient. And the model is still as pure as it was that day. We've tweaked some things, but we raise money. We go and approach a soup kitchen or mission pantry and say, we want to send you food, try to help you keep your shelves stocked. And they're a little suspicious at first, like, how much is this going to cost? It's not going to cost you anything. We want to ship you food. And then they said, well, do you want our mailing list? No, we just want to ship you food. So once we start doing that, it really works. And I'll give you, it took a long time to get a nonprofit to kind of get it snowball rolling downhill type thing. It was very modest and small at first, but I'll give you we're in 2021, 2019, which at the time was our best year to date. I think we shipped 270,000 pounds of healthy food across Mississippi. To give you an idea of the growth, in January, just January, 1 month this year, not a full year, 1 month, we shipped 280,000 pounds. And last year, it was just a record-breaking year. It was like 1 point something million pounds of food. Hunger agencies measure effectiveness in poundage. So all our food's healthy, but they measure it in poundage. And we run this thing with, I don't take a dime, never have, but we run with really 2 employees for a statewide agency. And most of last year we were doing with 1 employee. So it's very efficient. And that just became this thing. You said give back earlier, and I don't really like the term give back a lot, because that implies that you have to have received something first. And I think it's just a good idea to give. I was a pretty selfish, materialistic person for a lot of my life. And I think this Extra Table thing kind of, when it happened, and again, it was unintentional, like most things in my career, it happened. And once you start doing something like that, this is going to sound cheesy, and I'm going to say it anyway, but it's really like, this is the thing I was supposed to do. Like every other thing that I did in my life, the restaurant stuff, connections I made with suppliers, all of that, being able to, go into civic groups and speaking and all of that kind of led to that thing. And from that, we've started something called Hattiesburg 100, which helps sworn officers in the line of duty. We started Midtown Merchants Association. It's just, once you get that bug, you want to you want to you want to do something. You want to keep doing those kind of things, and I'm working with the state government right now on this campaign called One Thing Mississippi, based on the premise if everybody just did one thing, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to start a feeding agency. There's a guy here in town who picks up trash on the side of the road of 40th Avenue. I pass him on the way to my house from my office here. And once a week, nobody asks him to. There's no sign out there saying, this guy picks up trash. He just does it because he wants to do it. And when communities get people like that just do one thing, if we could get everybody in the state to just do one little thing, what a great place this would be. So that's kind of my next project, is this One Thing Mississippi deal.
Well, I was going to close with that. What's next for Robert St. John? I don't know what mountains left that you haven't climbed, so you think you're going to continue along that route?
I love doing that. I'm going to keep opening routes. Here's the deal. I'm a guy who sells filet mignon for a living, and I figured at one point it hit me, do I want to be the guy that sells filet mignon, or do I want to be the guy that hands out canned tuna? And I gotta sell filet mignon to put my kids through college, but I think I'm supposed to be that guy that hands out canned tuna. And so, I'll be doing a little of both as we go forward.
Well, I can't thank you enough, not just for taking your time to share it with our entrepreneurs here at Mississippi State, but for actually walking the walk and doing the work. So, Robert St. John, thank you very, very much for your time.
Thanks, buddy.